So the town of Bend, Oregon. Bend, Oregon is west of Eugene. It's a good way southeast of Portland. Bend, Oregon, yesterday morning, local activists there got a tip from a friend that two men who live in Bend had been arrested, picked up by immigration and customs enforcement officers, by ICE. And the activist didn't know who the men were. He didn't know why they were arrested, but he tracked them here to this hotel parking lot where ICE agents had loaded them onto these buses to take them who knows where. ICE wouldn't explain why they had detained these men. The activist decided he would put his body in front of one of the buses to try to block them from driving these guys away. And he meanwhile put out a call on social media for other people to come join him. And one by one over the course of the day, people started trickling in and they joined him, putting themselves between the buses and the road. By the afternoon, it was hundreds of people at this hotel parking lot in Bend. Turns out the two men who ICE had snatched off the street are guys who have lived in Bend for 15 years. They have families. They both have young kids who were born in the U.S. They were each on their way to work when they were grabbed off the street. One reporter from Oregon Public Media who was on the scene said when the families of these two men arrived at the protest, they leaned against the sides of the bus. They begged the federal agents to give the men food and water. The two men detained on the bus were apparently not allowed to speak with a lawyer. They tried to communicate with the people outside by banging on the sides of the bus and yelling through the metal walls of the bus. Protesters on the ground, you can see, pressing their ears to the side of the bus, trying to hear what the men inside were saying. Eventually, the sun went down, the parking lot floodlights came on, and the protesters stayed. Those buses still were not able to pull away. The men had been detained and sitting there on the buses for close to 12 hours at this point as the crowd grew and grew. And that is when federal law enforcement officers arrived in helmets and tactical gear. When they approached the buses, this is what they found: hundreds of peaceful protesters with their hands in the air. According to reporters on the ground, it was more than 50 federal officers who then stormed that peaceful protest. They fired tear gas. They fired other projectiles. They reportedly started grabbing protesters by their clothes and throwing them to the ground. And amid all that chaos they created, federal agents slipped the detained men off of the white buses and got them into another vehicle and drove them away. Today, lots of protesters returned to that same hotel parking lot in Bend, Oregon. They put flowers in the parking spaces where the white buses had been parked until late last night. They decorated the ground with chalk and wrote messages. Lawyers have filed a motion to try to block the deportation of these two longtime Bend, Oregon residents, but they remain in federal custody as of this evening. I'll be right back.